Hello, and welcome to the Homeschool with Moxie podcast, where our goal is to inspire and encourage you with actionable strategies to take you from overwhelmed to confident in your homeschool adventure. I'm your host, Abby Banks, and this is episode 308. Today, we're tackling a challenge that a lot of us homeschool parents face, and that is kids who absolutely hate writing. But don't worry, because help is here. I'm thrilled to welcome Julie Bogart, the founder of Brave Writer and author of the brand new book, Help, My Kid Hates Writing. Julie has spent decades transforming reluctant writers into confident storytellers. And today she's sharing with us why traditional writing instruction often fails, how we can inspire our kids to put pen to paper, and why writing still matters in the age of AI. So if you've ever battled through tears over writing assignments in your homeschool, this episode is for you. Don't forget, you can find links to everything and jump over to our show notes, which you will find at 4onemore.com/308. I think you're going to really be inspired and encouraged, and you're going to find a lot of actionable strategies in this episode with Julie. So enjoy. Here's my conversation with Julie Bogart from Brave Writer. Welcome, Julie, to the Homeschool with Moxie podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for inviting me, Abby.
So before we dive into your book, tell us a little bit about your background and your homeschool adventure. I think I read with 5 kids. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. They're all adults now. My youngest is 28. My oldest is almost 38. So definitely on the other side. But I started in the early 1990s, 1990, in fact, 1991. And I continued for 17 years. And then some of my kids ended up going to public high school, but all of them had various high school journeys, actually. And I worked in the field of writing, ghostwriting and editing and magazine writing back in the 90s, and hung out with a lot of homeschool families. And it was a friend who asked me for help to teach her kids how to write because she felt like she was failing. And when I saw the curricula that most homeschoolers were using at the time, I was mortified. It was so completely unrelated to how I understood the writing process, how to coach a young writer. My mother is the author of over 70 books. She passed away earlier this year, but I grew up with this very positive view of writing and a lot of freedom in self-expression, and I wanted that for all children. So that's really what kicked off Brave Writer.
Wow. So do you have a background yourself also in but when you were homeschooling your kids, had you been to school to study writing, or was this just naturally you learned about it as you homeschooled your kids?
Well, actually, I grew up writing anyway. Like writing was my favorite thing that I did besides acting. Those were my kind of 2 favorite things. And in college, I started out at UCLA as a theater major. And then partway through, I switched over to being a history major just so I could write. Now, that doesn't sound like a writing major, but let me assure you, it is. It's very different than literature. You're writing about real issues and you're doing data research and you're proving theses all the time. And for me, that was the most enjoyable experience I could possibly imagine. I don't know why, but I just have always had the innate ability. And by the time I was in my 30s, my husband at the time was a composition professor at a university, and there was an opportunity to edit kind of on the side, like as a freelance job, people trying to get their PhD dissertations written and accepted. And he didn't have time to do it. And I said to him, well, just let me do it. He says, why are you qualified? I said, I don't know. I just know that I can do that. I know I can do that. And so I said, don't tell them it's me. Tell them it's you, but I'll do all the work. And sure enough, I started helping people get their dissertations turned around. And that led to some ghostwriting opportunities. And then I became a magazine editor and a freelance writer. So I don't know. Part of it is innate. Part of it is my training of college. But in the end, a lot of it is just passion and the development of a skill. And of course, I've read widely and deeply on writing my whole life.
I'm laughing over here because my husband and I just have had this conversation. He's getting his PhD this year. And so he was looking for an editor, which this is hilarious because it's a huge deal. And you editors do an amazing job. So I think that's so fun. Wow. What a cool background. I did not know that. So Okay, so all of that goes into how you approach writing. How is it different than, I think you kind of hinted at this, how the schools normally approach writing? What's the big difference there?
So, most people who've been to school will remember getting a writing assignment, working on it at home, turning it in, and the only person who's ever going to read that writing is the teacher. And then the teacher takes however much time it takes them to read it, make cryptic notes like vague, nice description, more variety. What does this sentence mean? Smooth this out. These cryptic comments. And then they give you a grade. And that paper may come back within 24 hours, but usually it doesn't. Sometimes it takes as long as a week. And so, at the height of your interest in writing, there's literally no audience that's about to read it. All you get is an evaluator. It would be like endlessly taking piano lessons and never doing a recital, never playing at your mother's birthday, never playing for pleasure in a band. It would be just this feeling that endlessly someone's pointing out the notes that you're missing. Why would you continue? What would be the point of playing piano? And yet we treat writing all the time that it is this, treat it as this isolated experience for an evaluation that will help you sometime down the road. This piece of writing doesn't have any meaning except what it indicates about you as a student for the future. The way I approach writing is the way a professional writing instructor approaches it with people who want to get paid to write. I take this completely different point of view. Rather than trying to coach people into getting a good grade, I'm trying to coach them into self-expression. And self-expression is messy, it's unruly, it's imprecise initially. But my goal is to help the writer get in touch with having something worth saying that deserves to be read by an interested reader, not by an evaluator, but by somebody who's actually there to connect with the content, to actually feel the relationship with the writer. And so in Brave Writer, when we approach writing instruction, we use a method that I call reader response feedback that I developed over the last 25 years. And basically, it's this: if you give me a piece of writing, I will comment in full sentences throughout that piece of writing. So let's say your child submitted, 2-paragraph description of a kiwi fruit. And I read the first line and it says something like kiwi fruit is fuzzy on the outside, green on the inside. My response would not be good topic sentence. That's an evaluator statement. Mine would be fuzzy. I can immediately feel a kiwi fruit in my hand and I'm imagining the color green. I'm wondering what green is in your mind. I wonder what color green you're seeing, if we're seeing the same one. Then I read a little bit further. And throughout it, I'm giving my natural reader reactions, which sometimes include asking for more information. Ooh, tell me more about how you sliced it. Tell me more about the event where you are having kiwi, as opposed to vague, not enough descriptive detail. Add the 5 senses. Can you feel the shift in the difference of how that reading would feel for a child?
Wow. Okay. So that's very interesting. Now, I think a lot of homeschool parents, we kind of approach writing with a lot of fear and trepidation because of this, like evaluating. Maybe we are looking at it wrong. That's a very interesting, it's like a mindset shift, I would say. Well,
100%. And it takes
yeah,
a while for homeschool parents to trust it.
right.
Because if you have been damaged, and I would contend that most adult writers, most adults who've been through the school system have actually been damaged by that methodology,
Mhm.
you tend to double down on the methodology that caused you pain because you've started to associate pain with perfection, that the right way to get a perfect paper is to suffer. And so then we just double down on the same methods with our kids and we just keep telling them, you have to do it. I just need 3 sentences. This is important for your future, as
Mhm.
though that motivated anyone to write.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So this is crazy. Okay. So, well, what are those misconceptions then that we have about teaching writing at home? Can you go through a few of those?
Definitely. The number one misconception is that spelling, grammar, and punctuation have anything to do with writing. They don't. They are transcription skills. Writing is actually the inner life of a human being, just like speaking is the inner life of a human being. It doesn't matter if the person has the right accent. It doesn't matter if they misconjugate a word. If you can understand the intent of a speaker, we call it a win. We do the thing that they say. I live in Ohio. One of the common grammar uses here is to use the word don't instead of doesn't. She don't go to the store on Fridays. I perfectly understand that. There is zero need for me to critique that, to mention that that's a different conjugation than the grammar correct one that is used in standard written English. We treat speech with so much generosity, with enthusiasm, with a desire to understand what the other person is saying. With writing, we're like, well, you misspelled the word. I can't even read the rest of this post. How dare you use your instead of YOU apostrophe RE? That means your whole point isn't important. There is this sort of policing of transcription as a way to invalidate thought. And if we're going to teach writing, we want to put our kids first in touch with having something to say, and we can work on the mechanics using somebody else's writing. We can use tools we call copywork and dictation, where you're taking beautiful literature and learning how to spell and punctuate it without risking your own original thoughts. Meanwhile, when you are risking your own original thoughts, we need to create oceans of space for transcription errors so that the truly sophisticated vocabulary and slowly forming ideas have an opportunity to make it to the page before they are edited out or dumbed down to match their abilities.
So, if you have a reluctant writer in your homeschool, what can parents do? Because this does, like you said, this can become a daily battle. Is it just changing the way you're approaching it, the way you're talking about it? What are some of the ways that you can give parents, some advice here to how to encourage their reluctant writers?
Yeah, so the first place we begin is we don't start with writing. We start with catching them in the act of self-expression. This is a practice I call Jot It Down, and it's the most transformational practice you can do with any reluctant writer, no matter how old they are, by the way. Doesn't matter if they're 6 or 16. So here's the practice. You wait until you hear this child start to tell you a story in the white heat of their own passion. Like, let's say your child has just been in the backyard playing with the dog, and they come running in while you're making dinner. And your child's like, Mom, Rocky was chasing a squirrel in the backyard. I want you to turn off the stove, grab whatever is on the counter, supermarket receipt, back of a bank envelope, and a pencil. And without uttering a word, start writing down their exact words. Rocky was chasing a squirrel in the backyard. Write down as close as you can to exactly what they're saying. Now, some kids will be like, Mom, what are you doing? And what you say is, this is so good, I don't want to forget it, so I'm writing it down. And then you encourage them to keep talking. Now, there are a few kids for whom that's a little unnerving, so they may tell you to stop writing. At that point, I want you to become like a mental digital recorder. Hold as many of their words in your mind as you can, and as soon as they're gone, jot down what they said as close to how you remember it as possible. That night at the dinner table, I want you to pull out this envelope with these jottings and say to the family, Noah was telling me about how Rocky was chasing a squirrel in the backyard. It was so good. I wanted to write it down so I could share it with you and then read it back to the family. What you have just done is you've made the connection naturally for your child that the thoughts and ideas and stories that live inside their body deserve to be preserved in writing and read to an interested audience. You can then take that envelope, toss it in the library basket, and when you're reading books aloud to your child, you suddenly come across that envelope and you say, oh my gosh, let's read Noah's story again. Remember when Rocky chased the squirrel? And read it again until your child connects the idea that their inner life deserves transcription by any means, whether it's you, voice to text, a recorder. Until they make that connection, writing will simply seem like a chore in this tightrope walk of spelling, punctuation, and handwriting. And what we've discovered in Brave Writer is that once you start jotting down for your child and they start to experience the power of authorship, they actually will start asking you to jot things down for them. They will do it for each other. And there will be a day, and we have all the explanations in my books and in my programs, when they take up the pen for themselves and how they can make that transition. But for the truly reluctant, take the pen out of their hand, catch them in the act of self-expression, and jot it down.
I'm sure you have a lot of success stories you can share. Can you share, one of those with of a kid maybe that did hate writing to begin with? Can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, one of my earliest students was 16. He had completely stopped writing. His mother was pulling her hair out. They signed up for, I think, my very first online class, which was in January of 2000. So a long time ago. He's now, in his 40s, has 2 kids and a wife, and I still know them. And we started in class, and I said, okay, the first thing that we're going to do is jot down, he was a baseball player, his best baseball play. Let him dictate to you his best baseball play of all time. And because he was in a class, he was willing to cooperate. And so he described this play where he caught this incredible catch off of a bat, and it won them the championship. It was like this miraculous play. And it was a paragraph long of sentences that a sixth grader should have been able to write, but he was 16. And then they worked through it, and they did the whole revision process and the editing process. And he never used his pencil at all or a keyboard. His mom did the transcribing, but they worked through the entire writing process together. And within 2 years, he had gone through everything that I offered, including essay writing. And when he got to college, he got an A in his composition 101 class. And let me just tell you, this is a kid who I would not consider a good writer in the sense of, wow, I'm really wowed by his artistic sensibility. That is not who he is. What happened is his self-expression got uncorked. And learning to write essays is not difficult. I could teach you that on the back of a napkin. The formats are not hard. What's hard is insight generation and self-expression. Those are the things we need to work on. And he got there. And I think I've gotten over his adult life 3 different thank you notes from him for that journey, because it set him up for success. He was able to go to a good college. He ended up in a great career, and he still uses writing today. That's just one. I mean, I have dozens and dozens, but I love to tell that one because that's back from when I was just getting started and didn't know if my ideas would work, and they do.
So in this day and age, now we're dealing with AI, right? So
yes.
This is
yes.
getting a little crazy, and homeschool parents are like, what do we do with this? And is it important still to write? AI does so many things. It's not that great on some things. So what's your position here about AI and writing and kids still needing to learn how to write?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because in my book, Help My Kid Hates Writing, I dedicate a whole chapter to AI. And I got to spend time with Dr. Kelly Cohen at the University of Cincinnati AI Biolab, and I interviewed him extensively. And there are a few things that I would like to say about the rise of these large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini. And, maybe by the time someone's listening to this, there'll be a whole raft of new ones. It's growing and changing so quickly. AI is great in terms of chugging through a wide volume of information, right? There's new AI coming out now that can do depth research, which is like seeing a law library. Like my dad's a lawyer. So when I was a kid and he was in a downtown office, there's like a conference room with the walls lined with these legal tomes. And anytime you built a case, you had to know how to go through these books to find precedent. And it just took untold hours. What's coming is chugging through all that in moments, right? That's the power of AI. It can do the kind of work that humans used to spend so much time doing very quickly. But it is still the human's responsibility to vet and verify because AI hallucinates. It makes up stuff. It isn't always accurate. It is just sort of searching through what should be the most likely next word in a sentence. It's not thinking. It doesn't have intelligence. So how do our children relate to this? One of the things I like to remind parents is that people have been able to cheat in writing forever. My own father told me the story, and he's a lawyer, by the way, and he was an aeronautical engineer before that. He told me the story of how he paid his roommate to write his history papers in college at Notre Dame. Okay, this is in the 50s, people. The reason this is important is to know that there have always been ways to not write a paper. When the internet first came out, everybody was like, oh no, students are just going to buy papers. Yeah, they did. And students before them paid their roommates to write papers for them. The truth of the matter is, if you do not have the innate drive to write, you will find a way to cheat. And AI just makes it 10 times easier. So, what we really want now is for kids to tap into the value of self expression because the art of being human can never be imitated by a machine. But if students are being raised to write in format driven writing that sounds like a machine, then why wouldn't you let the machine do it? It's going to do a better job. It's not, if you don't have any sense of insight, any sense of personal self expression, of course you're going to delegate it to a machine. So, in a weird, backhanded way, the need to learn how to write for the sake of that inner life in you is at its most important moment. And I think really it's a time when we can capitalize on writing that way. And kids who get in touch with having something to say want to say it. You know how I know? They're everywhere on TikTok. They're everywhere on gaming chats. They're everywhere where writing is online right now. And they're not using AI for that stuff because the joy of self-expression is so potent. The only time they're tempted to use these horrifically cheat-like tools is when they don't value the writing and only value the grade. And that's got to revolutionize education. We cannot go forward the way we've been doing it.
Okay, so I've got a burning question. So should our kids in our homeschools ever be forced to write, a standard, hey, you need to write this report? Or is everything based on creativity and what they're interested in? Or is there a time and a place still to say, hey, we need to write this history essay or whatever? How do you work through that?
Well, yes, but they should want to. In other words, when we use words like force and have to, we've already admitted that this is a horrible writing project. We're basically saying, do this horrible thing. And we're saying, and you have to do it. But what is education? I literally became a history major so I could write research papers because they are the deepest joy of my life. How do we get a little of that into writing this report? When I worked with my children, they wrote every possible kind of writing format because it was entertaining to put their voices into a variety of containers. They wrote their own Greek myths. They wrote their own screenplays. They wrote their own fan fiction, and they wrote expository essays, elementary school reports. There is no limit on writing if you care about what you're trying to express. There is a huge limit on it if we treat a whole category of formats as drudgery. And I think the mindset of adults is insane. Like this whole idea that an essay has to be forced is so deeply sad to me, when an essay can be actually one of the most enjoyable experiences where you feel the power of your own opinions becoming made manifest persuasively. Like that is a heady experience. And like I said, you see it on TikTok. I was watching yesterday a Love is Blind deconstruction of this one guy who, turns out to have done some criminal behavior. And by the end of watching it, I was like, that is better than any essay she could have written. She had receipts, notes, substantiation, a well laid out argument, points. If we can start connecting our kids to the power of that, that's the goal of an essay. It's to grow the mind. It's to show you how to support your points with particulars. So that's what's coming. And I really hope, that we take advantage of the fact that this generation is more interested in self-expression than any generation in history.
So even if you didn't start with this mindset when your kids were young and you were starting to homeschool, what if you have that teenager that is it too late to switch?
Never. Never. Like I just shared about this 16-year-old. But here's a strategy that you could try. Maybe they're not going to run into the house saying, hey, my dog is chasing a squirrel. Those stories aren't coming from your 15 or 16-year-old. But your 15 or 16-year-old is going to ask for permission to do something you don't agree with. Stay up all night gaming, drive downtown without supervision, go on a date, whatever it is. The next time you enter one of those, I want you to grab a sheet of paper and start writing down all their reasons for why their case makes sense to them. And I want you to be interested, not combative, not coming back with all your reasons. Just start taking their communication so seriously that you would put it in your own handwriting. That's a place to begin. Another thing you can do with teens is read a book. Both of you read the same book, and maybe you only have time to do that once a year, but that would be good enough. Read a book together separately and set up coffee dates to talk about it. And then through text messaging, everybody has some kind of text messaging app. Discuss it. That's writing. That's the beginning of putting thoughts into written communication. Those thoughts can eventually even become an essay, but you can start with conversation, note taking, and this exchange. I have a chapter in my book called Write Back because most of us want to write back. We don't just want to write. Have you ever been in a comment section on Facebook or Instagram and you read something that provokes you and you're like, I've got to write back? That's what motivates writing. So part of what we can do with teenagers is actually engage that. One of the things I used to do in books that my kids were reading, if I had read the book, is I'd put in these margin notes, things like, come talk to me when you get to this page. I got to know what you think about X that just happened. Or I did not see that coming. Did you? Give them a reason to engage with you. Don't treat everything like you're just checking a list of requirements to get into college. That's so tedious. Such a waste of homeschooling.
Now, I get questions from moms a lot about this too. I'm going to quick ask you this one. So you're reading books, you're discussing it with your kids. Do they have to write book reports in homeschool? Is it have to be written, or can it just be that discussion? Is that good enough?
I mean, here's the thing. You can teach writing using any subject. Like parents will often say to me, yes, but someday they'll be assigned a topic that they don't like. Okay, a little secret from professional writers, we only write about what we want to write about. So if we get an assignment, we tweak it to suit whatever we're interested in about that topic. So kids will learn to do that, but they can't do it until they already know how to write. So we write using any topic. So the question is, should they write about books? In their early years, obviously, conversation, being in the room with them proves that they know that the story has happened and that they heard it. But we have an activity in Brave Writer in one of our products called the Dust Jacket Book Review, where they literally make a dust jacket for the book they just read. They illustrate it. They even make up reviews for the back of the book. I remember one of my kids had Darth Vader reviewing the book, right? So they're mirroring what's on a book dust jacket. And on the inside flap is a summary of the story. And on the back flap is the biography with a photograph of the author. So if you just had your child do that for a book, they have now officially done a book report. A book report itself is not that interesting. In fact, a lot of schools have kids writing Amazon reviews, right? That's one of their ways to get kids to feel like they're being published. The goal has to be engagement, not checking off a list. And as we get into this world of AI and we get into voice to text, where typing and handwriting are kind of going away, we have to shift our expectations over to that deeper knowing. Like, does my child have hold of an insight? That's the most important part of the writing process, not what gets to the page.
This has been so great, Julie. You have so much wisdom, and I've learned so much just from our little chat here. Can you wrap up by telling us about your new book, what parents will find in it, who's it for, and where people can find you online?
Thank you. That's wonderful. Help My Kid Hates Writing comes out April 15th. We have some pre-order bonuses right now, 3 months free on my Substack, and a beautiful Free the Writer in You family writing guide that comes out for those who pre-order. The thing I love about writing this book is that I got to preserve a pedagogy in writing that I feel is being rapidly lost today. This idea of self-expression as being the root of writing and that it's worth it to fan that into flame is being overtaken by this relentless need to evaluate. And we're seeing it in every school subject, not just writing. But this one really matters because self-expression is how we advance as a society and as human beings. Like, I want your kids to feel like they want to write their own vows and not delegate their vow writing to AI. I want them to write a eulogy for a beloved family member. I want them to feel competent and comfortable expressing what they need from a boss in an email. That's the power of writing. And so in this book, I titled it Help My Kid Hates Writing because I am addressing the hardest cases. even if you have kids who love writing, you will find important and useful skills in this book. But if you've got the hardest case, I have your back. That's what this book is all about.
Amazing. And where can people find you online?
I'm on Instagram at Julie Bravewriter. I have an author website, juliebogartwriter.com. And we have bravewriter.com, which is my company that teaches writing to homeschool and beyond families. We have online classes and all kinds of products that are suitable to support this understanding of writing. And we have 25 years of amazing results.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate your time so much.
Thanks for having me, Abby.